Hello, everybody, and welcome to Wyrd Awakenings. Hope you're doing good tonight. Hanging out with the guys, Stephen and Cecil and Tully.
What's
and
up?
Rest in peace, Julio.
Rest in peace,
Rest in peace,
Julio.
Julio. Yes.
I'm already neck deep in conspiracies about that. By the way, we could talk about it. We could talk about it after the show if you want to.
Oh, Julio, yeah,
Yeah,
That works.
He's spitting rhymes up in heaven.
Yeah.
he was spitting more than rhymes before he died.
The true paradise. He finally made it.
I think he might have flew too close to the sun.
You think?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're not actually talking about what happened with Mr. Coolio tonight. That's for another night.
Okay.
No, tonight we're talking about the theory of Jesus having a family and a bloodline that's still alive today. It was popularized in the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, which they made into a movie. But 20 years prior to that, there was a book called The Holy Blood, Holy Grail by, it was Richard Lee and Henry Lincoln, and I think Michael Bajent, or I forget how it's pronounced. But anyway, that they had the same theory going on way back then. And there are some rumors that Dan Brown may have gotten some of his ideas from that book. But the premise is basically that, Christ was married. He had children. It can go down the gamut from he actually faked his death on the cross to he did die on the cross, but that the Holy Grail, which was supposed to have been taken by Joseph of Arimathea, was his wife and child. So, guys, let's go.
It's a lot going on with this one.
Yeah.
It is. And I will start by saying none of us is a biblical scholar. The closest we're going to get is Mr. Stephen Hill here because he keeps us real. But,
I'll have the dissenting view at the end of the show.
There you go. But yeah, there is a lot to unwrap with that because, during that time period, a rabbi, as a general rule, could not teach unless he was married, and Christ is referred to as rabbi. And, and a man at 33 years old from a Jewish family would almost always have been married, and that's the historical, just, the times what they were.
From everything that you guys came across, do you think that Mary Magdalene was Jesus's wife?
Yeah. I think so. And I think he might have had another one too. It really depends on which one you go through. And I just want to come out and say this before we get started. Everybody says that he couldn't have been married because he was the essence of purity, but I mean, it was the earthly body of Christ, of God, so why couldn't he do what a man would do, be born pure, marry, and then stay pure, through marriage and have children so there wouldn't be anything impure about that. I wouldn't imagine. But yeah, I just want to get that out there. I'm sorry, I'm hopped up on a bunch of Benadryls and and everything.
My allergies have been bad too.
What, Benadryl hops you up?
No, I'm down. I'm
hopped.
For the record, hey Carrie, it does me. I've got a weird metabolism. I can take Benadryl and scrub my walls.
That's how my son is. He's
I'm doing the adult speedball right now. Extremely heavy coffee.
There you go. But yeah, and I agree with you, Cecil. I mean, there would be absolutely nothing wrong with him being married, because how, and this is just an opinion, but how, with Christ being, God in manly form, would he truly understand what it was to be a human man and not experience marriage and parenthood and everything like that? So, I mean, I think that's a logical thought process.
Yeah. Some of the books that they didn't include in the Bible are very interesting.
Oh, yes.
Like when you start reading Old Testament stuff.
Was it like a Jude that referred? I'm going to forget books and everything. Like I was explaining, my dog ate my notes. Legit. It sounds like an excuse, but it's legit. They called Mary his companion, which in those times essentially meant that they were married.
Yeah.
So I forget the book is either Jude.
Well, One thing that I came across, let me pull it up here. So this might have been part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but it was called the Syriac Gospel. And it speaks of Jesus and Mary Magdalene producing a daughter. And the later text is damaged, but it theorized just the way that it was written that it would have also been speaking of a second child as well. So potentially more than one.
I think the one key factor in this whole thing on how it could even start to where people would think that he would have made it through the crucifixion is the fact that Pontius Pilate truly didn't want to crucify him until like he was pretty much right there on the cusp, like we gotta do it. So I mean, there's a possibility that something could have been worked out at a high level there. Potentially one of the first known conspiracies.
Yeah, but the Jews were the Jews were not going to allow that to happen. Now, this was a guy that they paid Judas, 30 pieces of silver to betray him. After he'd been with him for 3 years, and then he did what he did. So with that, I kind of have my doubts on that.
Right, of him actually surviving the crucifixion.
It's fair.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There was, what was it? Someone said on one of these that I was reading that, so they said that on the cross that Jesus was given a drink of vinegar from a sponge and then he died.
Well, they punctured his lungs. That helped him away.
Yeah, but part of this, we'll call it a conspiracy, is that it wasn't vinegar, but something else. Call it venom, like maybe the pufferfish venom type stuff that just made him appear dead.
Did they have
kind of like they use in the Caribbean islands, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
For zombies.
Yes.
And voodoo
So-
and stuff. Yeah.
They think that whatever they gave him, just put him in like a coma, basically, until he woke back up 3 days later. There's one of the theories I was reading anyway.
Yeah. Well, if you want to dive into it, the south of France is the likeliest of suspects on where he ended up. If you go the route of Pontius Pilate actually had a villa, and I forget the name of the place. It was in the south of France. It was basically like one of the largest communes for Jewish people at the time. What was it called? I love my dog, or else I'd kick him in the face. But it was a town, and so they think that he escaped there with Mary Magdalene, where he had his children and involved in everything like that, and like the Bloodline of Christ began, and so forth, continues to this day.
I was reading something about genealogy that was like, once you go back past 7 generations, you're pretty much related to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of how that works, of how many people it takes in 7 generations to make that happen, to make you a person. So I always think about like various things that they're doing to, all of the CRISPR and like DNA editing and everything. Like that story about
Hey, Alan.
Hey, Alan.
Yeah.
There's a story about this guy in South Africa, and I don't know the guy's name off the top of my head. This is a few years back, maybe in the 70s, but this guy started producing powers equal to like Jesus, like he had Messiah powers, like was performing miracles and stuff. So he gets snatched up by these black ops organizations, the governmental organizations. They put him through tests, and it turns out that every time they hurt him, he's like regenerating his body, and he's performing all these miracles. Well, the government apparently decided that he shouldn't exist. So what they did is they cut him up. They put him in uranium capsules and it like made the radiation so high that it was like literally turning whatever they put in there to dust. Then they dropped those in separate places across the ocean. And the story goes that after they did that, they get back to wherever their headquarters was, where they were torturing this guy, and he just appears.
Oh, wow.
And he says, well, you know, it seems like you really don't want me here, so I'm going to leave.
One bounce.
And, but he said that they may have ran him away, but soon enough people would, you know, show these symptoms that he had. I call them symptoms. That's the only thing. These attributes that he had, that they wouldn't be able to stop him, stop it from coming out to the masses.
Uh-huh.
And that is allegedly what Stephen King based the Green Mile story off of.
Oh, okay.
Really?
Is that story? And I can't remember the project name or anything, but I'm sure that if you were to get on DuckDuckGo or Brave or something, you could find the whole story.
Okay.
But that's the gist of how it goes. And my theory is that, you know, like I said, everybody's related past 7 generations. So
Yeah,
maybe there is like a inter bloodline, you know, cell or part of our DNA that is linked to Christ himself. And, you know, 1 in every 30 something billion people may have that dominant, you know, attribute to where they have Christ-like abilities.
Right.
Yeah.
Hi, Landa.
Did you
Landa.
ever?
Hey,
Did
Mike.
you ever watch the show with Stan Lee whenever he was looking for people with superhuman abilities?
I know of it. I haven't seen it.
It's really good.
Yeah, that was interesting there, because there are some people that have some talents and abilities that just pretty amazing.
I want to jump in for 2 seconds and say, Tully, I love the way you said just a few years ago, like in the 70s. When were you born? Thank you. I appreciate that.
I was born in the late 1900s.
Okay.
I'm gonna be like almost 40 next week.
Almost 40.
Almost 40. You're gonna be at 35.
No, 37 or 38, somewhere around there.
Oh, man.
Okay, so anyway, but back to the genealogy, like you were talking about, Tully. And if you ever just want to see where yours goes, the Latter-day Saints has a great, you know, just like library of genealogies that people have submitted. And occasionally what I'll do is go in there and just start clicking on, like, I'll start with my father and then his father and then his father, and just stay on that same line just to see where it ends up at.
I can only see your profile picture, Linda, but you don't look 50. I'll say that.
You saying I look 37 or 38?
That's right, babies. There you go.
Yeah, welcome to the club, Landa.
Sorry for interrupting, Morgana.
No, that's okay. But so anyway, like I said, I'll just, it's on my phone. So if I'm sitting there with nothing else going on, I'll just start going back through a line of, you know, people. And I sat there one day and got all the way back to ancient Egypt. And I'm like, but I couldn't remember where I started, of course, you know. So I'm like, damn it, which relative was it? You know, which means absolutely nothing. If you can get back that far, like I say, we're all, you know, interlinked and everything. But it's very interesting, some of the things you find when you just start going back further and further and further.
Well, just like how we're all, like they always say, we're all related to Genghis Khan. You know, which
hey Mark,
you know, that whole deal pre-1900 history is questionable anyway. But
right,
you know, I think enough people talk about and/or have faith that Jesus and God, you know, there's that force in nature that, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire, like we always say.
Oh yeah. And I do believe, like I said, I have absolutely no question. And like I said, you know, this is just my opinion, that, Christ was a real person. And I believe that he probably did have abilities and things that you don't see on your average Joe. Just like I believe Muhammad was a real person, like I said, because I just feel like people as a general rule, especially something going back that far, aren't just making things up.
Well,
These days, there are a lot of people making things.
Oh yeah.
up, but
I don't know if you guys noticed, but we recently lost a queen,
yes.
and she traced her heritage back to Muhammad.
Mm-hmm.
She said
Yep.
she was a direct descendant of Muhammad. So
Yep. I was reading that earlier, actually when I was researching this again, because like I said, because I remember when Holy Blood, Holy Grail came out, that was probably my first book that talked about the bloodline of Christ. And, that was back pre-internet. So, or if you had it, you had to pay by the hour and you didn't just jump on to research things.
you didn't steal them discs from Walmart?
No, I did not. Hey, I had AOL back when it was by the hour or whatever, and I got an $800 phone bill because the number I was dialing into was not local. Yeah, that was the last of my per hour experiences.
Yeah,
And I will tell you this, if you call Bell South at the time is who it was and try to talk to them and work out an arrangement and they get snippy and you say, well, you know what, as far as I'm concerned, you can turn it off. They will.
Yeah. They don't play.
No, they don't. But like I said, you could, even when I can remember back then, the things I could find about this that today I couldn't touch. I've got binders of handwritten notes on this subject somewhere around this house because,
Really?
from taking notes, going to the library and things like that. It was just amazing. I went way deep down this rabbit hole. I'm talking probably 3 or 4 months. That's all I researched. So yeah, it was cool. It's very interesting.
Yeah, so I think you were talking about what the Book of Jude, and the other would be the Gospel of Thomas. I think was the one that actually covers this more than Jude. According to the Gospel of Thomas. Of course, part of the problem that you run into with some of these other books, even though it may have been given the name, of one of the apostles or someone like that, it was good possibility it may have been written 200 or 300 years later after the fact. Because the agnostics, they were not to pick on them, but I mean they have some books that they buy into.
Mm-hmm. Oh wow, yes, Mike, that's really showing our age.
See, I never had internet till like 2006 or something.
That was about the same time for me. Where we lived in the country, the AOL stuff didn't work. We had to wait till the phone company had dial up.
Yeah,
I had dial up till I was 23, I think.
Hey, look, I had broadband until Katrina, and then I had to fall back on dial-up, and I was not happy because broadband wasn't super fast, but it made dial-up look like you weren't even online.
Oh,
so, yeah. So I was very happy when I got my internet back.
Yeah, I don't miss that funny noise it made while it was dialing up.
Oh yeah. And yet, as to talk about the different books and stuff, I mean, even though something can be divinely written, when you have translations, some things are going to be mistranslated. Mm-hmm. And when you have people picking and choosing, because I think it was King James in the 1500s, King James Bible, they actually called in scholars and priests and everything to pick the books that were going into it. And one thing was King James was terrified of witches, that witches were going to curse him, this, that, and the other. So the original, I can't remember if it was Latin or Hebrew, of suffer not a witch to live was suffer not a demon to live. Mm-hmm. And because of James, they changed that out. But they said the way they had been looking at these books and everything for just weeks on end, and they decided that they were just going to put everything on the table and they were all going to turn their backs. And when they turned back around, whatever God wanted would be left on the table.
See, I
And
can't get over the Mandela tie-in about the lion and the sheep turning into the wolf and the sheep.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's strange.
right.
That really messed me up. Like I was sitting here thinking about the whole them rewriting the Bible.
hmm
Like it definitely was the lion and the sheep.
Right. I drew a picture of it for. I used to work for the bishop's office of the Methodist Church, and when I was doing covers for the annual conference stuff, one of the things I drew was a lion and a lamb.
Oh yeah, lamb. Sorry.
Yeah, actually, say
you-
a tomato, you know, but you know, you'll never convince me that when they had all this stuff on the table that there weren't things that, you know, somebody didn't have positioned well enough that they could pull it off the table when everybody's back was turned.
You know,
So-
one of the other prominent theories is that Jesus was actually a time traveler.
Is that a true theory?
It's a theory, yeah.
There's also a
But-
theory that he was Count Saint Germain.
What?
Yeah,
Was Jermaine even? Nobody even knew Jermaine back then.
They didn't know him
Exactly.
by Jermaine.
they knew him as Jesus.
Well, if we're getting into alternative stuff, I was saving this, but so this really struck me is, and this would be in the theory corner that that it's more of a story than an actual, you know, real life depiction. But the Egyptian god Horus, who predated the Christ by thousands of years, shares the following in common with Jesus in the story of Horus. So Horus was born of a virgin on December 25th. His early father was named Seb, which translates into Joseph. He was of royal descent. At age 12, he was a child teacher in the temple, and at 30, he was baptized and disappeared for 18 years. Horus was baptized in the river Jordan by Anup the Baptizer. It's spelled weird, but I'm still going to say it that way.
Mhm.
And that was translated to John the Baptist, who was decapitated. He had 12 disciples, 2 of whom were his witnesses and were named Anup and An, or the 2 Johns. He performed miracles, exorcised demons, raised Osiris from the dead.
What kind of regiment do you have those demons on?
Well, I don't know.
He's exercising.
It says that Horus walked on water. His personal, let's see, I'm going to skip that one because there's a lot of Egyptian words in there. Let's see. He was crucified between 2 thieves, buried for 3 days, and resurrected, according to this. Let's see. Like Jesus, Horus was supposed to reign 1,000 years, is what it says. But they said that this was inscribed like 3,500 years ago on the walls of the temple at Luxor. But yeah, I thought that was weird, which, you know, it's the internet. So,
Yeah.
you know, who knows how true that is. I don't know how to read hieroglyphics. There's a picture of the wall on there, but it's a
I'll
bunch
go
of
look at it in a little bit and I'll tell you what it says.
Yeah.
birds and people.
I mean, if that right there was really true, you would think that more Egyptologists would have made a lot bigger deal out of this. But
Well,
I've really never heard any of them talk about it.
That could just be conspiracy too. You know,
Yeah.
or if there is, you know, some smoke there, it could be buried by the Vatican.
Mhm.
There's lots of stuff who knows what's in the Vatican? Like they probably know the closest DNA match to Jesus. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
I like to get back to what I think might be the most logical one if he actually escaped. There's actually a story of a guy named Berenger Sonnery.
Sonye.
Yeah. He was really poor and everything. He was a priest in south of Florence or whatever. But he apparently got money out of nowhere and started buying ridiculous stuff, like just building all kinds of crazy stuff for his church and everything like that. There's actually an episode on
Is that the guy that he blackmailed the Vatican pretty
he
much?
blackmailed the Vatican is what they think, and he got unalived. So that might be one of the first cases of that, or one of the millionth, who knows? But but they think that he found the tomb of at least Mary Magdalene, and some people think Jesus was there too. And there's in that church that he had built, there's actually a strange thing. First, it's Mary Magdalene sitting in a cave, and you can see like these structures and everything. So these people think they found it. Another one is when they're hauling Jesus off the cross, it's nighttime because the full moon's out and everything like that. And apparently, one of the traditions of the Jewish people at this time was not to touch a dead body at night. So they're thinking that that he put like messages in his church to show that Jesus didn't really die on the cross because they want to haul the dead body at night.
Because doesn't he have like stained glass stations of the cross, and that they're not like the normal accepted stations of the cross? Is that the same guy?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
It's a pretty unique story, and the people think they found the tomb in the cave and everything. But I passed out.
And there are so many cave systems over in the south of France too. I mean, and if that's where he was, I mean, there's a very good possibility he may have come upon something.
So,
but the tomb apparently houses Mary, Jesus, and 2 children.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How do you feel about the thought that maybe Jesus's DNA had been altered by something, like some external force? Like, we call it God, but
I'm not saying it's aliens.
Well, and here's what I'm getting at. I'm definitely going on the edge of crazy with what I'm about to say. But there have been people who say that extraterrestrials respond to like exorcisms, like that they respond to the name of the Lord,
right?
And that really surprised me whenever I was reading about that.
So would that be like the signs thing, like they're allergic to holy water and everything?
I don't know.
I
have no idea.
Yes.
Even to say that maybe people aren't necessarily possessed by demons all the time. Maybe sometimes it's an alien that they're exorcising.
Or maybe the demons are demons.
That's what demons. A lot of people think that extraterrestrials are just leftover, bastards of the Nephilim, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There's some who put forth the idea that's where the demons come from.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I mean, the offspring of the fallen angels,
like the thin veil that separates us from the other worlds,
right?
And they're able to cross over.
Yeah.
I want to know, Carrie, did you steal that holy water from the church or did you buy it?
But I'm thinking maybe the Anunnaki had a hand in it somehow. But also, do you remember when I was telling you guys about the story of like what people think Mothman is? Like that it's actually like some cryptids are actually humans from a far distant future
dressed up
who have came back in time to try to study us because they've made themselves so feeble through gene editing that they want to try to regain some of that strength. like that Mothman, what people see as Mothman is actually like almost like a Iron Man suit, which is why the eyes glow red.
Well, they've got that guy that's flying around and everything in like Los Angeles and stuff.
Yeah. But the theory on that is that these people that are coming back in time are from like thousands of years in the future. And, you know, they're just studying periods in time where, you know, people had certain genetics that they're interested in that would be able to help them not be so frail. Like that specific person, like the there's supposed to be different forms of extraterrestrials that people see. And the one that they think is the Mothman is like if they were out of that suit, according to this theory, they would literally fall down dead just from like breathing the air. But untouched, they live like 800 years. That they've edited their genome so much that they can live a really long time. They're just really feeble without any technology.
So is it like a situation where they've evolved to surpass oxygen?
No, they have to have oxygen, but think about like if we're on this trajectory for 3,000 years where, you know, you have VR and everybody's living in a pod and you've got an avatar out in the real world and you never get outside, and
like surrogates.
Yeah, exactly like surrogates. It's that situation to where we're already pretty close to where that would be possible. And then if you lay on that for 1,000 years, you know, the evolution of humans would literally change to where you don't need to use your muscles or anything anymore. You're just laying in a pod all day.
That sounds like me.
Well, have you ever watched any of the interviews or seen any of the studies whenever the say like they send the cosmonaut who are astronauts to go spend time in space, how much muscle mass and bone density they lose?
Yes.
And how quickly they lose it?
Yes. And after so much time, they don't regain it back.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So simply being away from the gravity really has an effect on the body.
So
maybe that's why they're visiting it every so often.
Yeah.
Huh.
Because do you remember that case where there was and I'm getting off topic, but there's the case where the aliens were under that lake in Russia, and there were divers that they ended up dragging down.
No, where did that happen at?
There, if you were to Google like Russian lake aliens, it would probably come up. But there were divers; they had no clue what was going on, and then there was a UFO under the water, like in the lake.
Huh.
And you see videos of them diving into the oceans and stuff. Like maybe they take breaks from space.
You know, it's interesting you brought that up, because one theory about the Bloodline of Christ is that after he survived or whatever happened to get past the crucifix, they think they actually replaced himself and actually trekked through Siberia, up through Alaska, and over to the Americas. But somehow he took a boat from Alaska to Japan, and he ended up living his life out in Japan until he's 106 years old, and he bore children in Japan. And there's actually a burial site. Where is it at? Let me find it real quick. It's somewhere out there in Japan.
So, Mark Edie, there's your answer about did Jesus come to North America?
So it's
I've heard people say that before. They did. So supposedly there's a calendar somewhere. I'm not sure.
It's Cecil. It's in. I have it pulled up.
My dog ate my notes. I can't believe it.
So
it sounds so stupid to say that. Like
it says that at least according to one Japanese tradition, his burial mound can be found in Shingo,
and it's currently being maintained by yogurt factory.
It seems, according to this lore, that Jesus' lesser known brother. It says his brother's name is Isikiri.
Well, that's because he's lesser known.
Took his place on the cross so that Jesus could escape. Jesus then moved to Japan, married, and settled down until age 106. And it says you might wonder why Jesus would have chosen Japan for retirement. It turns out that the missing years once again explain this theory. During the undocumented years of his life, Jesus was actually studying under a master at the foot of Mount Fuji.
Yeah.
When things became troubled in the West, he fled back to his spiritual home.
Well, a lot of his teachings mirror some Buddhist teachings.
There's a theory that he's Buddha. Like that people, the person that people call Buddha was actually Jesus is one of the theories.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And yes, so you're basing that on the story that they thought he went to India.
Yeah.
From 12 to 30.
Yeah.
Which would make sense. I mean, if you have this super chill guy teaching like really airy philosophy, like to find inner peace and stuff, that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because sadly, there are a lot of people who call themselves Christians. I'm not talking about real Christians. I'm talking about the other ones
I know about
that would persecute Christ today if he came back preaching the same message he did then.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Well, it's just like I said, as recent as the 70s, they pretty much cut a guy up that exhibited any abilities.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They are the same people, Mark.
I literally cannot. It's taking me like I got through 2 words of that. I need to put my glasses back on.
I'm sorry. Here you go.
Can't see nothing. Oh yeah, could be.
But don't tell anybody we told you.
That's secret.
Well,
she's going to have to go back and watch this one now.
Right. And okay, now here's another one, a huge theory, actually. The tie-in with the Templars being the guardians of the bloodline. And that they have actually... Go ahead.
The Templars turned into the Freemasons, right?
Correct. For the most part, yeah.
And the Freemasons are...
I think there's a brief period there where they were actually the Illuminati too.
Well, yeah, I'm just trying to put it all together.
I think they're probably still so.
Because the Freemasons literally worship the devil. So
that right there just depends on what lodge it is.
Yeah.
So you got different all that stuff right there. It's kind of confusing trying to keep up with all that because you got Skull and Bones, you got the Freemasons, you got the Skull and Bones, you had the Knights Templars, you had all this. There's just a whole lot of secret societies.
I think after
branched off from the Templars,
after the Holy Wars, the Templars were persecuted after fighting in the name of the Lord, though, right? So maybe that's
because they think that a lot of it was they had more money than God, literally, and that the church owed them tons of money, and instead of having to pay all that back, they became, Satanists that worshipped, I think, Baphomet or something.
That's where that's where Friday the 13th comes from, when they murdered all the Templars, I think.
Yeah, because they actually had planned it, and they hit France, England, and all these houses and everything at the same time. Some of them, I think, got wind of it and supposedly disappeared. They never found their treasure.
Like a mob hit.
That's why some people thought it may have gone
exactly
to
like that.
Yep, exactly.
But so the surviving Templars, maybe, I think the Masons that are really nefarious are like the 33rd degrees, right? Like you get that club in Disney, like the 33rd Club or whatever. But I think maybe your local lodges aren't nefarious, but you can literally look at the symbol for Freemasons, and it's an inverted pentagram.
I know that is what the Eastern Stars is. Is an inverted pentagram with nothing else trying to hide the fact that it's an inverted pentagram. It's just there, boom, in your face. But see, there was also supposed to be a group, and this is another one of your secret societies, called the Priory of Sion, that was founded
yeah.
in Jerusalem during the First Crusade.
Yes. Yes.
And
yes.
that is supposedly really close tied in with the bloodline also. That they
So-
were founded to protect the bloodline.
What
Yeah.
if only the people who denounced God got out of that? You know what I mean? Like maybe that's how all these downstream organizations like the Illuminati and Skull and Bones, like maybe Friday the 13th happened, the hit happened, all the
Because
good guys
they-
got killed and the bad guys got away.
Right. By,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Like
turning
the
over.
Titanic.
Like the Titanic, yeah.
Mhm.
Nice.
Maybe that was the first big ruse.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
There's been ruses throughout history, friend.
But then, and here goes the thing too. And outside of the 7 generation thing, there are people who claim that they have a direct bloodline to Christ.
Mhm.
And so, of course, a lot of these people are royalty, in other countries and stuff. So of course they're going to claim it because, and at one time, I know that, as far back as Egypt, most of the time royal marriages were between a brother and a sister.
That reminds
Because
me of Preacher.
yeah,
There's been a
The
lot.
show Preacher.
I've watched, I think, the first 2 seasons of it.
That's
I had to
That's the
take a
most
break.
blasphemous thing I've ever seen in my life. It was so blasphemous. I was like, "This is too much." I had to
Yeah,
get that off.
they had the descendant of Jesus, and it was like you were saying, he'd been crossbred so many times that it was awful. It was crazy.
It was, very,
Right.
it was a very diluted bloodline.
Good
Well-
enough. So he was his own grandpa, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it showed.
Yeah.
What did they call him? He couldn't speak English. All he could say was, I think it was Humperdoo,
Yeah, something like that.
and they called him Humperdoo.
See, I haven't gotten that far yet. So,
It's like Cecil said, it's awful, but that was actually pretty funny.
mhm.
Mm.
Yeah. I guess I kind of went into it thinking it was going to
was
be
a
a
good
more
show.
serious show, more so than sarcasm and funny.
It's
So-
like dark humor.
Yeah,
Some of it's
yeah.
serious, but
Well, and the thing about it is I'll go back and finish it, but I think I binged it like in 3 days, those first 2 seasons. And I was like, okay, I need a break. It's time to move on to something different.
It gets out there.
Yeah, it does. But and that's the thing. They were, when they go back, like I said, back to Egypt, they married brother and sister because the mindset was you cannot be a god if you mix with common people. So, all of the intermixing of the European dynasties and royal lines and everything.
Is
Yeah,
that where the term hillbilly royalty comes from?
Maybe so. But I mean, that's like, Queen Elizabeth, not Queen Elizabeth, but Queen Victoria, most of her bloodline was hemophiliac, and it was directly tied to the interbreeding. Alexei Romanov, the last Tsar's son,
Yes.
his mother was like Victoria's granddaughter or something like
like
that.
that.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, they're all interbred,
keep it in
I
the
mean,
family.
absolutely. Because, they couldn't find anybody good enough, I guess,
Then the last of the bloodline, she actually had to go to Germany. They actually had to go to Germany to find more another relative to sit on the throne.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
Russia.
Yeah.
They did split into 3, didn't they? They went to Germany, Russia, and France. Isn't that the 3 that separated or something like that? I can't remember.
Yeah, well, see, all of Europe. I mean, the king. In Germany, it never was Germany till like the late 1800s. It was always a bunch of smaller empires.
Well,
Right.
Part of
Luxembourg and, all those
Yeah,
little
you had
places.
the
Habsburgs and
Visigoths and
mhm.
Ostrogoths and
I
whatever.
like
Yeah.
to go there and drink
Well,
some.
that's where the Merovingians came in too, which is supposedly that bloodline.
Yeah, we briefly touched
Could've
on
been.
that, Alan,
Mhm.
Yeah, we
whenever we were talking about that.
Yeah. Yeah. See, whenever they weren't allowed to marry outside the family, you would sooner or later you should expect some craziness to
That's
pop
right.
up.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, that's kind of why they started outlawing it, you know, in a lot of
Yeah.
places. Hi, Laura.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Hey, Laura.
But, you know, and like I said, I mean, I think they should probably outlaw it a little bit more than they have in this country because I
I
think
believe in
anything,
freedom.
I
Let
believe
people
in
do what they
freedom
want.
too,
Stop
but
it. Stop it. Literally, so when my grandfather was in the nursing home, there was someone who had been born of a brother and sister,
Mhm.
and she had no eyes. She was completely deaf and curled up like arms and legs curled up, and literally they were keeping her alive, and she'd been alive like 30 years, and all she would do all day is just scream.
Well, you know, you say that, but
Mm.
there's, I know of a person that was born of the same situation that's perfectly normal.
Well, yeah, it's a gamble, but
Right.
what I'm saying is,
Luck of
like,
the
why
draw.
would you take that risk?
Mhm. Yeah.
And if you're
Mhm.
doing that, think of how many, like, if it's a gamble,
Yeah.
think of how many behind the scenes births that these royal families have where it's just beyond repair and they get, you know, tossed off a cliff or something.
Yeah.
Well,
Kind
they
of,
did
like
say
ancient Greece.
that they did
Right.
say,
Yeah.
they did say that Jesus's bloodline did become royalty in France. So are you saying that that's probably what ended up there?
Mhm.
The Whitakers are actually close to where Cecil and I grew up. I think that was Alan that said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's a few of the Whitakers around our area. I don't know.
You
They
go
wasn't
to
very
any
special.
IGA on the first of the month, and you'll see all of the Whitakers.
I'll tell you what you could do. You can go to any ATM in the county, and if you had a helicopter and had a heat sensor, you could see every ATM in the county by the line of people lined up around the building.
We used to call it the tornado effect. You'd have the cars wrapped around the bank at
Yeah,
midnight on the
people out
first of
there
the month.
partying, getting drunk.
Not just that, but people would go buy
Midnight.
pizzas and sell pizza to people waiting to hit the ATM. That's
I
a true
did that.
story.
I used to work at
Wow.
a pizza place, and I would drive by there and be like, "Hey, what's up?"
But I think that the bloodline of Christ is a very. I mean, like there's no absolution.
No.
Like you're not going to know because the people who do know have it kept locked up probably under the Vatican.
It's
Oh,
one
yeah.
of those things that happened so long ago. It's just like everything else. History's been changed and altered so much that there's no
Mhm.
way we'll ever know unless we
But
can
here's
travel.
one thing that I will say. Just like with the extraterrestrials, nefarious things in this world are afraid when you use the Lord's name. Like
Mhm.
that's a common theme,
Mhm.
Right.
and there's no coincidences to that. I feel
Right.
so there's definitely some power in His name, regardless of what happened, what the
Mhm.
truth is,
Mhm.
and even. I mean, you guys know the Pope that we have now is like he's
Yeah,
a character.
Yeah, he's fulfilling the prophecy of the popes quite
But
well.
he literally at this point, I don't think he
Like he's
can say
checking shit
Jesus'
off.
name.
I'm sorry.
I said at this point, I don't think that he can say Jesus' name like it
Yeah.
in any meaningful capacity.
Right.
It's literally like he's checking stuff off. Like, oh, I got that one down.
Mhm.
Like,
Right.
but we can't go there, I guess.
So
We almost
all that
traveled into dangerous territory right there.
all that to say that I feel like that there is power in his bloodline,
Mhm.
and that within ourselves, whether it be biologically or spiritually, there's some connection to the divine. And
Mhm.
if you like, maybe we're connected to the same divine that Jesus was connected to, and not that we're connected to Jesus himself.
Yeah.
But
I believe
one
everyone has that option.
one way or the other, there's power in what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, their stories. It's a forgive me, I cannot remember the doctor's name who told that. I mean, just like some of these guys who did the UFO research. I don't remember the professor who did that, took it on, and he thought it was just people were just having mental breakdowns or whatever when they were talking about alien abductions and stuff like that. And he finally came to the conclusion, that there's really something to it. So,
Right. Well, and and I firmly believe that strange part of our brains that we supposedly don't use, I think that's where things like your beliefs, your faiths, the things that are really there, the things you carry in your heart and your soul, I think that's where things manifest from.
Well, and think about, like, it's like I always say, why do they want you to know that information?
Right.
Like, if you were born not in this era, and you were born like in the, early days after Christ, you wouldn't have been told that you can't use your brain and that you're like a lesser being and all of this other stuff. And there's a reason that kind of time frame was a hot spot for all these religious figures. And I think it's because when you're born as a clean slate, like I'm sure that you guys can even remember being children and just like the innocence that comes with that before you're, corrupted by, today, especially today, think about how many things are out there to corrupt you in one way or the other. And you didn't have all of that. You were literally part of nature.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that. Like, I think there's a reason that it's constantly put into our faces that we're somehow, lesser beings, like just some experiment of the universe, whenever really, when it comes down to brass tacks and, you have a situation like an exorcism going on, you're literally like you're a human being, but it's the power in that is able to push something out of somebody that's nefarious like that. Like you're an instrument.
Right.
Right.
But that's, the same deal with like the powers of prayer, the powers of spell work and stuff like that, that you've got to believe it, because you can pay lip service to it, or you can say, oh yeah, I believe this or I believe that. But if you don't truly believe it, it's not going to have the power and the impact.
Right.
But like I said, you see so many instances of people who, because of their faith, because of their beliefs and the fact that it is there, it's whole, doing things that other people say, oh, well, that doesn't work. They're just, they're crazy for thinking that. Well, they continue to think it for a reason. I feel like it's more than just faith. I feel like that there is something they have seen or felt on a level that tells them unequivocally it's real.
Yeah. Human intention is nothing to be doubted.
No.
Right.
No. And, I do tell people too, what you send out to the universe, to the world, you get back. So if you're sending out nothing but ugly and negative, that's what you're going to have in your life and you're going to be surrounded by. So, I mean, it's the mind and the soul are so connected, so strong, and so misunderstood, because, everybody's got an opinion, but it's just sitting back and watching what people have done with it.
Exactly.
Even someone that is pure hate, they have power too. I mean, because they believe it firmly within every fiber of their being.
That's true.
Yeah, they're kind of like psychic vampires sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I met a couple of those.
Yeah.
And they drain everyone around them. I mean, and like I said, if you're not aware, you're just like, oh, I've just been been down, been in a bad mood. And you're like, nah, it's more than that. It's that moron sitting over there next to you. We got to do something about this. But, I mean, because it is, it's, I actually had someone that I worked with one time. I mean, she was just constant negativity. And she was going to leave her husband one day because he told her she was negative too much. And And of course, she looked at me. Am I really that bad? And I'm like, well,
Sounds like
know,
my mom.
I firmly believe in being honest here, so let's go there. But she was, and she couldn't understand why she was unhappy all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's because that's what you're sending out, so that's what you're surrounding yourself with.
Yeah.
And she's still that way. But her life, she's got to live it. I don't have to deal with her anymore, so it's all good.
It's hard to change stuff like that in people.
Right. Oh yeah, that's it. You have to want to see difference in your life.
Mhm.
It's kind of like when you quit smoking or something, unless you've made up your mind to do it, you're not ever going to succeed at it.
Yeah.
So, it's and it's sad because, I would love to be able to just like poke a spot on somebody's forehead, and say, okay, you're good now. Let's move on.
Yeah, that would make life easier sometimes.
Yes, it would. Yes, it would. But
If I
alas,
was smoking, I wouldn't have nothing.
Hey, you do you, Cecil.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not judging. Again, your life. You're an adult. Do what you want to do.
Yeah, I don't know with this right here. I mean, there's a lot of different views, and a lot of different stuff comes about with Jesus and this bloodline and all that. I know I watched the movie, read the book, by Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code and all that, which was interesting. I mean, for a movie, it made a pretty good movie.
Uh-huh.
But for me personally, I believe him going to the cross, that was the goal the whole time.
Yeah.
For him to become a man and go to the cross and pay for the sins of the world.
Mhm.
So that was
his purpose fulfilled.
That was his purpose fulfilled in my view. So
Yeah.
all the other stuff, it's always fun. It's always interesting to read other thoughts, and other opinions, things like that. But,
yeah. Well, that's right. And like I said, but that's that pure faith that that people need, because I tell people too when they say, "Oh, I'm not perfect, but I'm forgiven." But you know what? I forgive my kids when they do wrong, but they got punished anyway.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people realize there might be a little bit more to that. You're forgiven than just, oh yeah, everything's gone. Come on in. No more problems. Well, dude, you did a few things, and waiting till that last few minutes to say, oh, I want forgiveness isn't going to wash.
Right.
So,
I make sure to ask for it every night before I go to bed.
I know you do.
Yeah.
I got washed the other day.
Yeah. And I do recommend those apocryphal, the Dead Sea Scrolls stuff. There are some very interesting books in there. There was one, and I forget which one it was, that was about Christ as a child. That was very interesting. I mean, because you start to see other parts of him, because like I said, most of us never think about, well, what was he like as a kid? He didn't just become 28 overnight.
Right.
There's a big gap in there.
I mean, he did kill somebody when he was a kid.
Well,
that isn't how the story goes.
But,
the story says there was a kid that accused him of pushing another kid off of a roof that had killed him.
Yeah, so he brought him back from the dead to have him clear his name.
Yep, he brought him back from the dead just so he could tell them that he didn't, and then he fell back dead again.
Yeah, but that would be, to me, another part of that. How can you truly know what it's like to be a human if you don't experience human things? I mean, accidents happen. Maybe he just bumped him and he fell off the roof.
That's a big decision. I mean, I guess if you're born of the vine and you know that you're different from everybody, that would be a big decision to be like 30 years old and be like, okay, I guess I'll do this and go through with it.
I'd probably be a bit of a prick.
Because literally, he could have, like, with all of that power, he could have probably taken over the world, if he really wanted to.
Yes, very true.
There's there's a place where he stated, he could have called at any given time. He could call 12 legions of angels. So
Yeah.
I guarantee you, angels are more powerful than we are.
Oh yeah. Yep.
The pictures of angels, that's some scary stuff. Like there's definitely a reason that they say "be not afraid" because they're terrified.
Kind of like those weeping angels on Doctor Who.
Yeah.
They look all sweet until you turn your back on them.
Yeah, it is something else. Like to look at the accurate depictions of angels. If you've never done that, you should go to your favorite browser that isn't Google and do that.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, this one's been interesting. And like I said, let us know, if you liked it, if you want to hear something specific. In December, we will be having a show where we're talking about what's coming up next year. And
Yep, we're having a Kumbaya show in December.
And we we would love for you to throw any ideas out that you'd like added to the list.
We're just going to talk to y'all. So
mark
it on your calendars.
I mean, ideas like CERN.
It's in January's calendar.
How does CERN play into this whole thing, you think?
If he was a time traveler.
Traveler.
That and
the
Mandela effect, changing the line to the wolf.
True.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're going to call that one. And until next time, stay weird. There we go.